Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We've pulled together quite a stack of recent news sources covering events across the United States and Canada, mostly from mid-May through, say, early June of 2025.
And it's not your typical deep dive, right, where we focus on just one thing. This collection, it gives us more of a snapshot of just a few weeks.
Right.
Showing the huge range of things happening. You've got serious natural disasters, weird animal sightings, big political moments, even some legal drama mixed in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our goal today really is to guide you through these events as reported in the sources we looked at, pull out the main details, the surprising bit,
Get a quick overview.
Yeah, a quick informed overview of this specific period based on what these sources highlighted.
It's actually a fascinating collection because it just shows the diverse and, yeah, often unexpected things that fill the news landscape across North America in such a short time. We should explore what stood out here.
Let's jump right in then. Starting with the earlier stuff in these sources, mid-May timeframe, May 16th, there was a specific detail that popped up about the legal proceedings involving Diddy and Cassie.
Yeah, what the sources picked up on there and covering that legal case was how certain pieces of evidence were being used. The reporting specifically mentioned lawyers using these particular text messages.
Huh?
They called them the freak-off texts in the reports, using those as part of the proceedings against Cassie. It was just a specific detail the news sources flagged from the court context.
A striking detail from that situation.
Okay.
Shifting gears quite a bit, May 18th, the sources reported on a really significant fire at a historic property down in Louisiana.
That was the Nawway House plantation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reports really emphasized its history, built way back in 1859.
Wow.
And unfortunately, the sources stressed the scale of the destruction. As said, much of the structure was just destroyed by the fire.
Just devastating, seeing a place with that history damaged so badly. Then, May 19th brought news of, widespread destruction of a totally different kind.
This is when the sources were full of reports about that devastating tornado outbreak across multiple U.S. states.
Yeah.
The coverage focused heavily on the human cost, saying dozens of people died, and the storms just caused catastrophic damage. Clearly a huge, widespread, severe weather event making headlines.
And, almost hard to believe, but the same day, something else completely unexpected happened, involving, major infrastructure in New York City.
Right, the ship hitting the Brooklyn Bridge. The sources went into detail on that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just any old ship. The reports specifically ID'd it as a Mexican Navy training sailboat.
A training sailboat, wow.
Yeah, and the sources also reported the tragic outcome, 2 people killed and at least 19 others injured in that crash.
Such a strange incident, but with really serious consequences. And all on the same day as those tornadoes. And the bad weather, it wasn't over yet, right? May 20th saw more.
No, it kept going. The sources continued reporting severe weather. They mentioned a pretty fierce tornado sweeping across a town in Oklahoma.
Okay.
The reports even noted that forecasters had actually expected a moderate risk of tornadoes there. So it shows that whole weather pattern was just continuing from the day before.
And amid all the damage reports, the sources also shared some, personal stories. I saw that heartbreaking detail about the Newlyweds in Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
Lost their first home and their wedding rings in one of those storms.
Yeah.
Adding those specific personal details, it really drives home the human side the news was trying to capture.
Absolutely. And, the news wasn't all weather that day. There was also a specific political moment on May 20th that the sources highlighted.
Ah, yes, from a Senate hearing. The sources covering that, they seem to focus on an exchange where the Homeland Security Secretary got asked about habeas corpus.
Right.
And according to the reporting, in that specific moment, Kristi Noem incorrectly defined the term.
And what's interesting there, just based on how the sources covered that moment, is you see how these technical or legal terms can suddenly become flashpoints in political questioning. And Muth coverage often zooms in on perceived missteps like that. Again, we're just relaying what the sources reported happened in that hearing.
Okay, so moving into late May then, the news keeps up its unpredictable mix. May 21st, another weather-related incident, but a pretty surprising one.
Yeah, this one was odd. Sources reported a police car in Oklahoma again actually got hit by lightning during all that severe weather hitting the Midwest and South.
Hit by lightning, wow.
Just another example of the sort of freak occurrences within those big storms that make the news.
And later that day, the news spotlighted something happening at Columbia University's graduation.
Yeah, the reporting on that event detailed graduates booing the university head.
Okay.
And according to the sources, this was linked to the detention of a pro-Palestinian protester by immigration authorities. The coverage specifically noted graduates were chanting, "Free Mahmoud."
The sources really seem to capture the tension of that moment, right there at the graduation. Okay, shifting gears completely now. May 23rd, the news took a much lighter, kind of unexpected turn.
This is where we get one of those really memorable and frankly unusual details from the sources. They reported the commencement speech at the University of Maryland was given by Kermit the Frog.
Kermit the Frog. Giving a commencement speech. That's definitely not your average news item.
Not at all.
And the sources did add a nice bit of context, didn't they? Pointing out the connection that Muppets creator Jim Henson graduated from UMD back in 1960.
Yeah, it helps explain the why behind what seems like a random appearance. Makes a bit more sense with that context the news provided.
Right.
Also on May 23rd, another animal story popped up, this time out in Colorado.
This must be the runaway kangaroo. Irwin, was it? In Durango, Colorado?
That's the one.
The sources said police had to, apprehend him. And they even mentioned body cam footage caught it all. It's just one of those quirky local stories that somehow bubbles up into the wider news cycle.
Definitely an odd one in the news flow. Okay, let's maybe step back for a second, look at something more national perspective maybe. Covered on May 25th, one source was looking at Canada.
Right. It specifically discussed what Canadians were making of the monarchy, and it used the phrase, in the Trump era, according to the source.
So that source gives us a little window into public opinion, or at least a reported perspective on public opinion on that specific topic in Canada, highlighting a particular lens as reported there.
Okay. Then May 26th, the news covered a few different things. President Trump, sources reported he laid a wreath at an Arlington cemetery Memorial Day ceremony.
Yep, the sources noted that. Pretty standard presidential activity for Memorial Day, covering the ceremonial part of it.
And also on the 26th, nature was back in the headlines, but far away from the tornadoes we were talking about.
Hawaii's Kilaua volcano erupted again. Sources described it as, one of the world's most active volcanoes.
Right.
And they gave this really striking comparison for the scale of this particular eruption, said it was spewing lava as high as the Eiffel Tower.
As high as the Eiffel Tower. Wow, that detail really paints a picture of the power involved.
Doesn't it? Really vivid imagery from the sources there.
And circling back to that monarchy discussion from the 25th, the 26 sources had more on that too, focusing on a royal visit.
Yeah, a BBC royal correspondent was quoted weighing in on King Charles III's then upcoming trip to Canada.
Okay.
The source quoted the correspondent saying the trip was more than just a royal visit, and specifically highlighted that the king would be opening the country's parliament. That detail from the source explains why it was seen as particularly significant.
Right, connects back to that Canadian perspective source too. Seeing the news focus on the king opening parliament. Then May 27th, the sources followed up on the visit itself.
Yeah, the sources covered key highlights from what the reporting described as the king's historic 2025 visit to Ottawa and the actual opening of the Canadian Parliament. So reinforcing the importance the news placed on that event.
And also on the 27th, something pretty dramatic happened back in the U.S. that the sources picked up.
A truck exploding while driving through a Chicago suburb.
Exploding.
Yeah. The sources detailed that the driver was taken to the hospital, but thankfully specified the injuries were non-life-threatening. So a really dramatic event, but the reporting included that crucial detail about the driver's outcome.
A chaotic scene, but good news for the person involved, as reported. Okay, let's move into early June now. These reports include some follow-ups on things that happened a bit earlier.
Right, so on June 3rd, the news reported the capture of those two escaped inmates from New Orleans. This capture, according to the sources, happened in Texas after a high-speed chase.
And the context the sources gave was that they'd fled a Louisiana jail just days before.
Right.
And they weren't alone at first. They were with 8 other inmates.
Exactly.
So this capture reported on June 3rd was part of a bigger picture, a multi-state manhunt involving that whole group.
Right. Shows that multi-state dimension. Also on June 3rd, the news featured a huge natural event impacting Canada.
The wildfires, aerial footage showing massive smoke plumes from Canadian wildfires seemed to be everywhere in the reports.
Yeah.
The sources specifically mentioned Manitoba had declared a state of emergency and told, 17,000 people to flee? Just highlighting the enormous scale and the official response affecting so many.
And then on the very same day, June 3rd, a completely different kind of story popped up from Tennessee that the sources found noteworthy.
It's quite the juxtaposition, isn't it? Wildfires affecting thousands, and then the search for a pet zebra on the loose in Christiana.
A pet zebra?
Yeah. The sources noted it had been filmed galloping down a road on May 31st. It's just so unexpected to see something like that reported alongside major disasters.
It really underscores the sheer variety, doesn't it? The mix of things that fill the news cycle day to day. Okay, finally, let's look at a really recent event reported just 2 hours ago, according to one source we saw, happening June 5th.
A fire damaging city buses in Philadelphia. The sources reported as many as 40 buses damaged in this fire.
Yeah, but what's notable from the reporting, the details they included, these buses were apparently in a lot already filled with decommissioned vehicles, like scheduled for disposal anyway.
Okay.
And the Philly Department of Public Health put out a warning, cautioning people to avoid the smoke. But importantly, the sources noted no injuries were reported.
Right. Those details give the full context presented in the sources, the number, their status, the health warning, the lack of injuries. Got it.
So looking back at this whole collection now, covering roughly mid-May to early June, wow, what a snapshot, huh?
Seriously. It's quite a ride. We've seen reports from devastating tornadoes, massive wildfires forcing evacuations, a historic building burning down, a ship hitting the Brooklyn Bridge, a volcano erupting like the Eiffel Tower, a truck exploding.
Yeah.
And then woven through all that, you get these specific legal details. A kangaroo escape, Kermit the Frog giving a speech, political moments in hearings and graduations, discussions about the monarchy, a big royal visit.
Diving into the specific set of sources, it really just reveals the unpredictable, sometimes, jarring flow of news in the U.S. and Canada during that short time. It clearly shows how these really serious, tragic events can sit right next to the surprisingly strange, the quirky, or the political moments. They all find a place in the daily news landscape.
It really makes you think about how this particular mix, the mundane, the tragic, the political, the just plain weird as presented in these sources, shapes how we perceive what's going on.
Which kind of leads to a question for you, the listener, reflecting on this collection, all these different events.
Yeah.
Which one stood out most to you? And maybe why did that specific report grab your attention?
Yeah, good question. And maybe taking it a step further, thinking about the bigger picture these sources paint together. Is there any common thread? I mean, what possibly connects something as devastating as widespread tornadoes claiming dozens of lives with something as unusual as a runaway zebra being reported on a road?
Or a volcano spewing lava sky high.
Exactly. Or even just specific details from a legal case getting highlighted. What does this specific blend of reported reality tell us about, I don't know, the nature of news coverage itself, maybe? Or just about life in North America during this period? Definitely something to chew on as you process this unique snapshot from the sources.